Tyres is a short story by Adam Thorpe published in 2000. It is a tale of obligation, the continuation of family tradition, death, love, guilt, and grief. It is from the perspective of a confessional first-person narrator named Raul who reminisces about falling in love while working as a mechanic in his father's tire shop during the time of the Second World War and German occupation of France. The story begins in 1942 when the narrator is 17 years old and has sighted the first German limousine. He twice daily observes and slowly falls in love with a girl named Cecile riding on a silver bicycle past the garage on her way to work. Throughout the story, Raul and Cecile slowly discovered each other, and their relationship development runs parallel with the extent of the German invasion and its resistance. The story steadily builds up tension till the lurking inevitable horror is laid bare by the end of the tale. Graphic visual imagery and auditory descriptions paint the brutality of war at the ground level. The pursuit of resistance members on their fighter trucks, which were huge for those days, 6 cylinders. A 12 or 13-tonner diesel by the 2 German armored cars end up with black smoke. Several loud bangs and terrible tearing sound made by some kind of machine gun that was firing like mad. The violence and brutality of war become even more apparent when these resistance members are mutilated and hung from the town bridge for the entire silent and pale village to witness, including the schoolchildren. These members included the narrator's village acquaintance, the son of the butcher, whose guts were literally looped and dripping almost to the floor, ripped open by that brief burst of gunfire. The narrator seems to have escaped the mandatory military service through his father's shaking a few hands. Although Raoul's father cautions him to not get mixed up in the French resistance members called the Maquisards. Yet the senior Paulhan quietly serviced the resistance members' vehicles while pretended that he didn't know, but somehow those boys never paid, including the famous Petit Hours, the leader of the resistance faction. He was one of those hung on the town bridge and once mentioned by Cecile, indicating that she secretly spied for him. Raul had once met a resistance member in a cafe who told him to try a nail or two. Otherwise we'll be thinking you are collaborators. This is at once a command and a threat, which foreshadows and later forms the basis of Raul's later sabotaging of the German officer's tire. That resulted in the horrific crash, rendering Raul forever conscience-stricken, and the metaphorical beginning of winter, not the end. Raul had tampered with the German officer's Maybach's tire inner tube until it looked frayed, but still just airtight. Cecile, whose bicycle's chain had come undone, had accepted a lift from the officer, perhaps to get to her work on time or to spy some information out of him. Unable to stop the impending crash, Raul had heard a distant bang and clatter. The story ends with the now 44-year-old unmarried narrator still working his family's tire shop and still regretful of his part in Cecile's death. Although time had mended the physical scars of the accident, as that the tree is well again, with terrible scorch marks on the trunk have been long rubbed away while the dent has grown out. Yet, the narrator still strongly feels remorseful and ever loyal to Cecile, as he feels someone who, if suddenly no longer there, can leave a hole in your heart and a feeling of doom. Perhaps the strict moral compass surrounding responsibility in death was ingrained by Monsieur Paulhan's persistence on the highest standards, as a frayed tire might lead a man to his death. He was the kind of person who did not eat for 3 days upon learning of the car accident and subsequent death of Madame Renouvin. The narrator directly addresses the reader frequently through the examples of "let me assure you of this," or "do I make myself clear?" This technique involves and directs the reader's attention towards the happenings of the story, while the narrator provides explanations for his actions. Another narrative technique employed by Thorpe is that of foreshadowing. Other than the resistance members' dialogue that foreshadowed the later tampering and crash, Cecile's bike's loose chain suggests her imminent death. Her bike's tires stopped working just as her life stopped moving forward. While driven towards the generational occupation and village life, Raul, in his childhood innocence, once believed the tire and inner tube being the body and the soul. For a young Raul, an inflated tire that bounced was happy, while a deflated tire was sad when its chin lay flat on the ground. But the now matured and hardened Raul thought Tyres to be tubeless and soulless. This creates a certain sense of unease and tension throughout the narrative that gives air to existential anxieties. The tire is a kind of metaphor for the time passing, the disposability and insignificance of material life. Just as the discarded and forgotten tires are left to be burned by the farmers, the old and emotionally sensitive people are burned out by the horrors of war and the cruel society. Moreover, the story also serves as a cautionary tale of the ripple effects of far-reaching consequences of one's choices and actions that can negatively affect personal connections.